I'm Tracy Sabol. Tonight on EWTN News Nightly, campaign blitz as former President Trump and Vice President Harris head back out on the campaign trail. The White House makes a major announcement about contraception. War in the Middle East. Israel targets a Hezbollah-run financial institution in Lebanon. The global church. Analysis from A.C. Vimmer on the recently released Vatican statistics on Catholics worldwide. Plus, adding to the ranks. Pope Francis canonizes 14 new saints during Mass in St. Peter's Square. We have a report from Rome. These stories and more tonight.
From EWTN, the Global Catholic Network, this is EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you for being with us. Our top story tonight, the race for the White House. We are now at 15 days and counting until the November 5th presidential election. Donald Trump and Kamala Harris are hitting the campaign trail hard in strategic battleground states. Trump with 3 North Carolina stops today and Harris targeting Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. The race believed to be a dead heat. White House correspondent Owen Jensen brings us the update. Owen.
Tracy, good evening to you. We'll begin tonight in the state of North Carolina. That state expected to cast as many as 5.5 million ballots, with more than 1 million votes already submitted since early voting began last week.
After working the fry station at a McDonald's in Pennsylvania, today former President Donald Trump visits North Carolina, getting an up-close look at the storm damage in Asheville. The presidential campaign here playing out in the aftermath of devastating Hurricane Helene.
We want them to live and survive and be happy and healthy, because this is really a tragedy.
Later, the former president holding a rally in Greenville, North Carolina.
On day 1 of the Trump administration, I will terminate Kamala's insane electric vehicle mandate, and we will end the Green New scam once and for all.
Meanwhile, Vice President Kamala Harris holds a town hall in suburban Philadelphia.
On the issue of partisanship, yes, we're going to have disagreements, but I actively invite good ideas from wherever they come. That's why I'm going to have a Republican in my cabinet, by the way.
Harris is on a campaign blitz, making multiple stops in the swing states that could decide the outcome of the race. And with just 2 weeks to go before Election Day, the White House announcing a new proposal involving contraception. The rule would allow millions of people on private health insurance to pick up free condoms, birth control pills, or morning-after pills from local storefronts without a prescription.
Congressional Republicans have also repeatedly blocked federal legislation to safeguard the fundamental right to birth control for women in every state. It's dangerous and it's unacceptable.
And President Joe Biden writes in a statement, at a time when contraception access is under attack, Vice President Harris and I are resolute in our commitment to expanding access to quality, affordable contraception.
Now, the president's push goes against Catholic Church teaching. The Catechism calls contraception, quote, morally unacceptable. Instead, the church supports natural family planning. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
Well, the U.S. Secretary of State is headed back to the Middle East seeking a ceasefire. It is the 11th time since the start of the war in Gaza that Antony Blinken has visited the region. It comes after the death of Hamas chief Yahya Sinwar and after a leak of highly classified U.S. intelligence documents on Israel's plans for retaliation against Iran. An investigation is underway on how the material was made public. Officials are surveying damage after Israeli airstrikes hit close to a dozen branches of a Hezbollah-run financial institution. The strikes targeted branches in the southern neighborhoods of Beirut, including a 9-story building which was flattened. The Israeli military issued evacuation warnings ahead of the strikes. Meantime, Israel apologized for another airstrike, which resulted in the deaths of 3 Lebanese soldiers. Israel says that it thought it was targeting a Hezbollah vehicle. All right, now I want to bring in Nadine Menza. She is the president of International Religious Freedom Secretariat at the Wilson Center and former chair of the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom. Nadine, great to be with you. I know you're in Syria right now, and I want to talk about that in just a moment. But first, Secretary of State Antony Blinken will be departing for the Mideast later today, and the U.S. Special Envoy is in Beirut. What are the chances the Biden administration could bring these conflicts to an end?
I think it's unlikely because Israel has been pushed to a point where they see Iran as a threat. You know, we see Hezbollah funded by Iran. We see drones hitting the prime minister of Israel's home with drones made from Iran. We see Hezbollah violating this UN resolution, 1701 since 2006 by leaving weapons, keeping weapons on the border with obviously the UN not enforcing that. And so I feel like Israel has decided that they need to draw a line in the sand and say we're not going to be victims anymore of Iran. So I think the only way this is going to have a ceasefire is if, in fact, Iran backs down and Hezbollah moves weapons away from the border. And a lot of things happen that Israel is demanding.
Yeah, it's very, very concerning. Do you think the canonization of the martyrs of Damascus, do you think it gives Christians a sign of hope in the midst of all of this going on right now?
It does, because, to know that the world hasn't forgotten that this is the birthplace of Christianity. They have the oldest Christian communities in the world, and to be able to have that come to attention right now, and to have that spiritual encouragement for the Christians here, it's been very meaningful. I've heard from a few people about it, even that are different Christian denominations, and it's any time that they can remember the Christians here, it does give them hope that they haven't been forgotten. And right now, with what's going on all over the world, they feel forgotten.
Yeah, they definitely do. Nadine, before I let you go, I want you to talk to us a little bit more about why you're in Syria. I know yesterday was a very significant day.
It was. So 7 years ago this week, the Battle of Raqqa was won by the Syrian Democratic Forces. And these forces right now are actually a majority Arab, but they started as Kurdish forces, and then the Christians joined, and then the Arabs joined. And so it's a multi-ethnic, multi-religious military that defeated Raqqa. I was literally in a stadium and I was asked to speak. It was so humbling to thank the people of Northeast Syria for really stopping ISIS from continuing to grow and become a threat to us in America and other countries. And so we thanked them, and I was able, to talk a little bit about also the thing that made it so special is they weren't just fighting ISIS, but they were fighting to build a better future for the people of Syria. And so the combination of both what they've done with the defeat of ISIS, but also by building an inclusive government that Christians can live in and be safe and prosperous is so impressive. So to be able to be here and to thank them during such an important celebration was very meaningful for me.
Well, Nadine, thank you for your time today and for this important conversation. We appreciate it. God bless.
Thank you so much.
We just passed the one-year anniversary of the October 7th Hamas terror attack on Israel. Cardinal Pierre Batista Pizzaballa, the Latin Patriarch for Jerusalem, sat down with EWTN News foreign correspondent Colin Flynn to discuss the effects of the war in Gaza and the future of the region.
I don't see leadership with vision. Violence produces just violence. You need new language, but you cannot have new language if you don't have new people, new names, new faces. Yes, I mean, now you need something new, creative, I don't know what. But all the previous agreement, ideas, perspective to state, to solution, whatever, everything is not realistic now.
What is your message, Cardinal, to the Palestinians, and what is your message to the Israelis?
I don't know if I have a message to them. First of all, I want to say to them that violence in the language, in attitude, refusal of the others are not the solution. Palestinians, Israel, are called by God to live one close to another, not against the other. And they have to rediscover their call. And I say to our Christian community in Holy Land, in all Middle East, we have just finished to celebrate a Mass for the martyrs of Damascus, that the answer to the violence and to the evil is the cross.
And if you'd like to see the full interview, including where they discuss the state of Christians in the region and the impact of Israel's killing of Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar, just head to our YouTube channel. All right, now to Cuba, where for the fourth day in a row, much of the country remains in the dark after a massive power grid failure. Protesters hit the streets banging pots and pans in anger, saying they have no water and their food is going bad. The country's energy minister says that he hopes the electricity grid will be restored later this week, making matters even worse. Tropical storm Oscar, the system is bringing high winds and heavy rain to the island. All right, for more, I want to bring in Francisco J. Minaldi. He is the director of the Latin America Energy Program at Rice University. Dr. Minaldi, great to be with you today. We really appreciate it. So this is the longest blackout in Cuba since the fall of the Soviet Union. Why does this keep on happening?
Well, they have very old thermoelectric plants that haven't had maintenance for many, many years because of the economic situation in the island. And so the lack of investment, both in transmission and in these generators have created permanent mini crisis, but right now it's one of those big ones because of a chain reaction that caused the blackout.
Yeah, Dr. Minaldi, tell us how this is affecting the people of Cuba right now.
Well, it's a terrible situation. Imagine it's not like your normal programmed blackouts or partial blackouts, but it's a full blackout, so people are running out of the basic necessities. There is no refrigeration or air conditioning. People cannot, recharge their batteries. It's a very dire situation.
Yeah, and it's a dire situation overall in Cuba, as it is anyway. What's the situation right now? Where does it stand? I mean, is there any chance this power grid will be restored anytime soon?
Well, they will need to do some relevant investments. They also have an issue with the difficulties finding the fuels because they completely depend on oil and diesel coming from Venezuela, Mexico, and Russia. And so they have been having difficulty getting those fuels. And so the combination of both things, the lack of investment and the lack of fuel, is making it hard to completely get to normal. But at least it's expected that they could get the situation normalized in the next few days.
Well, that is good news for sure. You talked about Cuba, potentially Russia stepping in to help. Anything else we need to know about this crisis right now taking place in Cuba?
Well, the priorities, of course, of Russia and Venezuela for different reasons, they cannot help as much as they did in the past. Mexico has stepped up, but so far, the situation continues to be very problematic. And there is no sort of end in sight for the crisis because the economy of Cuba is in very bad shape, and the needed investment will be very hard to happen.
Yeah, and we need to pray for everybody there. Thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Sure, happy to do it.
Well, the U.S. House Task Force investigating the first assassination attempt against former President Donald Trump released a new report today. It includes excerpts of testimony from local police officers who provided firsthand accounts of the lack of communication and security failures at the Butler, Pennsylvania rally. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales joins us now with the latest. Eric.
Good evening, Tracy. Yes, the new report contains nearly 24 interviews with local law enforcement authorities and thousands of pages of documents reviewed by the committee. The findings put more pressure on the leadership of the U.S. Secret Service to make significant changes beginning at the top. Task force members in charge of the investigation said the common theme was a lack of communication by the Secret Service.
There were some enormous gaps that you've mentioned in terms of people texting information to each other rather than using the radio, in terms of people not even knowing that there were two command centers. There were huge gaps, and there were also some gaps, frankly, in kind of culture and people being relatively lax in the way that they communicated with one another.
Besides inadequate planning and coordination, the bipartisan task force report also found the local sniper team had a narrow field of vision and were not positioned in the right places. As for the shooter, Thomas Matthew Crooks, law enforcement were slow to share information on the escalating threat. And new information, the report states a local law enforcement officer shot at Crooks prior to the sniper firing the deadly shot, but missed. The autopsy shows Crooks died from a single shot, which entered through his upper lip and exited through his neck from a long-range sniper fire. And Crooks never used a ladder to climb on the roof. Law enforcement placed it there after the shooting.
This tragedy, the very real threat to democracy of our nation, escaped that day. I think we realized it was entirely preventable. But because of failures by the Secret Service, the shooting was not prevented.
The final report from the task force is due out December 13th. It will also include findings from the second assassination attempt on the former president at his Florida golf course. The committee is yet to announce if a second public hearing will be held. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
And we have a lot more still to come here on EWTN News Nightly, including Beyond the Numbers, analysis of the recently released statistics from the Vatican and what they say about the state of the church. And why a royal tour turned rowdy. You are not our king. Those words shouted by an Indigenous Australian senator as King Charles visited the country's parliament. The monarch still holds the ceremonial title of head of state over the former British colony. Many government leaders declined invitations to the reception because they would prefer an Australian to run the country. Well, there is more reaction to the recently released statistics from the Vatican regarding the number of Catholics worldwide. The study found there are 1.39 billion Catholics, or 17.7% of the world's population. That marks a one-year increase of nearly 14 million, but in other areas, there are some worrying numbers. The study found that for the fifth consecutive year, the total number of Catholic priests in the world declined. According to the Vatican, there are around 407,000 priests globally, a net reduction of 142. The biggest drop was in Europe, which had a decline of 2,745. But in Africa and Asia, the number of priests rose. Africa saw an increase of 1,600 priests, while Asia experienced an upswing of more than 1,100. And for analysis of all these numbers, we turn now to AC Wimmer, editor-in-chief of CNA Deutsch. AC, always great to have you on. First off, your take on these numbers from the Vatican and what jumped out to you the most?
Thanks, Tracy. It's great to be here. Look, heaps of things jumping out. Of course, on the one hand, this massive growth that you're seeing in Asia, in Africa, and then on the other hand, the decline in Europe. But it's one thing to look at the actual numbers and another thing to look at the quality. The quantity may be clear. You know, Catholic population in Europe decreasing by almost 500,000 people. And then what you're looking at then, though, are the actual causes and how that relates to people. We recently saw with the trip of Pope Francis to Belgium, really negative reactions coming out of even Belgian bishops to some of the things Pope Francis said. And that is the kind of fueling of negative sentiments that leads to also then a loss of influence of religious life. And you combine that with other qualitative factors, like an aging population, that perhaps also has less babies, there's a lower birth rate in Europe, and you come up with a sort of a dynamic here that we're witnessing. And that in particular for Europe is part of the story that we need to tell, that we as Catholics need to be aware of.
Yeah, and on the flip side, in Africa, the Vatican found there was a rise of 7 million Catholics there, and that is just 1 year. Talk to us about that and what's fueling this.
It's fascinating. And I was talking to African colleagues just here in Rome the other day about it. And clearly the picture is the same that you're getting from scientists looking at this, social scientists, as much as people specializing in the situation in sub-Saharan Africa in particular, Tracy. And it is this: they have strong family values, they have more children, higher birth rates, and evangelization efforts are bearing fruit. The work of the missionaries, be they European, American, or African now increasingly, is bearing fruit. The church is seen as a source for hope, for community. There are social services involved, and there is a clarity of teaching from most of the bishops there. There's a lack of ambivalence that you're seeing coming out of some of these other bishops, in particular in Europe, of course, as we all know, and that leads to an increase in number of African clergy and religious at the same time. So it's a really positive, almost like a power dynamic that's happening there in Africa.
Yeah, really bright spot right there. I also want to talk about this. You know, we mentioned the decline in priests for a fifth consecutive year. Let's talk a bit more about that and how worrying is this trend?
Look, you ask the experts and you'll get different answers on that. The global number has decreased, but it is only by a small figure. If you look at, sort of 3 digits, maybe 140-ish, and the total number, which is over 400,000, one might say, and some do, that's a smidgen, that's almost nothing. But at the same time, as before with the other aspects, you're dealing with things that are beyond the numbers also important. Namely, there's an aging clergy population in Europe and in North America, as we know in particular. But there's also fewer vocations in Catholic countries, at least on the diocesan level, especially in so-called progressive countries, secular countries, although traditional Catholic areas and traditional Catholic institutions are flourishing in some places. And then there is a rise in other people working in the pastoral care sort of environment that can be very positive. So you see a rise in permanent deacons, and you see a rise in pastoral carers and things like that. Plus, of course, you see an increase in priests elsewhere. When you look at Africa, you know, so I was saying 140 priests less, but in Africa it's 1,600 or so more. In Asia, over 1,000 more priests. That overall picture, therefore, is actually quite positive despite the decline in priests, Tracy.
Well, AC, thank you so much for weighing in and unpacking all this for us. We really appreciate it. God bless.
Likewise, thank you.
Well, as the nation heads into the upcoming election and the political environment grows more divisive, it is important to keep prayer at the center of our lives. And beginning on Sunday, EWTN will broadcast the Novena to the Mother of God. And you can follow along with a free ebook of the Novena from EWTN, along with each day's prayers sent right to your email. EWTN will broadcast the Novena every morning and evening from October 27th through November 3rd. Up next on EWTN News Nightly, a priest, a nun, and a father of 8. They are just 3 of the 14 newest saints in the Catholic Church following yesterday's canonization mass. We have a report from Rome. Pope Francis is set to publish his 4th encyclical later this week. This one is a reflection on, quote, the human and divine love of the heart of Jesus Christ. The Holy Father believes that we can all benefit from meditating on the Lord's love for us. Finally, tonight, the Church now has 14 new saints. During the canonization mass yesterday in Rome, Pope Francis upheld the examples of the saints, saying there are men and women who did not live for their own glory, but for the glory of God. EWTN Vatican journalist Benedict Sidegren has more.
During the Holy Mass in St. Peter's Square, Pope Francis commended the 14 new saints' lives of sacrifice, missionary zeal, and service to the Church.
These new saints lived Jesus' way, service. The faith and the apostolate they carried out did not feed their worldly desires and hunger for power, but, on the contrary, they made themselves servants of their brothers and sisters, creative in doing the good, steadfast in difficulties, and generous to the end.
11 martyrs and 3 founders of religious orders are the Church's newest saints. Italian sister Elena Guerra, who founded the Oblates of the Holy Spirit, as well as Canadian sister Marie-Léonie Paradis, founder of the Little Sisters of the Holy Family, were both declared saints for their dedication to spiritual and educational missions. Italian priest Giuseppe Alamano, the founder of 2 religious congregations, the Consolata Missionaries for Men and the Consolata Missionary Sisters for Women, was also proclaimed a saint. In an interview with EWTN, the new Superior General of the male branch of the Consolata Missionaries spoke about the new Italian saint's spirituality and global legacy.
He said that we have to be extraordinary in the ordinary. And that's really to be now, this time is that be a person, be a human being, and let the Holy Spirit convert you and transform you to become what the Lord actually asks you to be.
Pope Francis also declared 8 Franciscan friars and 3 lay Maronites venerated as the martyrs of Damascus as saints. Murdered out of hatred for the faith in Damascus, Syria in 1860, their martyrdom took place during a period of sectarian violence. Druze militia entered the Franciscan convent in Damascus and massacred the friars. Manuel Ruiz and companions, along with 3 laymen who were biological brothers, Francis, Abdelmohti, and Raphael Masabki. They were brutally killed after refusing to renounce their Christian faith and convert to Islam. Some were beheaded with sabers and axes, others stabbed or clubbed to death. With this canonization, the Pope has now proclaimed 926 saints during his pontificate. In Rome, Benedict Cedergren, EWTN News Nightly.
And we thank you for watching tonight. Remember, you can follow us on social media, Facebook, X, and Instagram at EWTN News Nightly. I'm Tracy Sabol. Good night and God bless.